July 1983, Goldfields Asia, a multinational mining corporation, informed the University of the Philippines about the accidental discovery of an ancient burial site in their concession at Manaba, Mankayan, Benguet Province. They were willing to host a group of academicians who might help them understand what the discovery meant in terms of the culture of the natives. The University of the Philippines, through Vice President Oscar Alfonso, immediately responded by funding Project Lazarus. Composing the team were Dr. Zeus Salazar, group leader and ethnologist, Professor Israel Cabanilla, University Museum curator and archaeologist, Professor Jerome Bailen, physical anthropologist, Dr. Jaime Veneracion, ethnohistorian, and myself, as filmmaker and visual anthropologist.
So probably just planting the... maybe...
Our mission was to retrieve, if possible, 3 coffins of unusual design, so as to prevent their desecration and deterioration, and to make them available for study by students of Cordillera cultures and history. After a 2-day exploratory survey, we rendered a preliminary report which included our film rushes. We pointed out to the UP Vice President the archaeological importance of the site, for it was the first time that a Carabao motif in burial coffins was discovered. Indeed, such artifacts are indispensable in explaining the lifeways and cultures of prehistoric Filipinos. The trip to Mankayan was a tortuous 6 hours from Baguio, along the potholed Halsema Road, some 100 kilometers from Baguio City in the Cordillera Central of the Philippines. Treading rugged mountaintops about 6,000 to 7,000 meters above sea level, our bus had to stop for the unavoidable mechanical check and repair about 5 kilometers from the mining towns of Mankayan and Lepanto. This gave us the opportunity to interview fellow passengers, residents of the place, and get a first glimpse of our target community. We learned that mining and vegetable farming constituted the major livelihood of the people. We saw the graveyard of the Muellers, the American entrepreneurs who opened up Benguet to the world capitalist system. At 6 p.m., we finally arrived at the Goldfields Asia field station. We were met by the field operation engineers who gave us some briefing. We plotted our next move, though we were still in the dark about what to expect. A necessary part of our trip was a call on the mayor. Mayor Augusto Santos, who hails from Pangasinan, had reservations regarding our request to bring to Manila some of the coffins, including their contents. According to the mayor, there had been cases in Ifugao and Cabayan when the removal of the coffins and mummies from their burial sites coincided with the onset of famine, drought, and calamities which the natives attributed to the anger of the ancestral spirits.
Since maybe it is impossible.
At the time of our visit, Mankayan was a sleepy town, a far cry from its period of growth when the prices of copper and gold in the world market made it the center of commerce in the upper Cordillera. The people of Mankayan were basically transients. About 80% of the population came from the Ilocos region and Pangasinan, drawn by the mining bonanza last quarter of the 19th century, when the Spaniards were finally able to assert their supremacy over the Cordillera. Intrusion failed to completely obliterate the culture of the people of Mankayan, the Kankana-ey. Traditional huts are still in evidence. Most of the houses are located at the higher plateaus, not very far from rivers. In the past, the river had a very special place for the people, for it was a source of life-giving protein and irrigation for the crops, and also as a final abode of the spirit. In the Malayo-Polynesian tradition, of which the Kankana-ey are a part, there is a belief that the spirits linger with the living until they are carried by the rivers and streams to their final resting place in the ocean. This explains why ancient burial grounds are situated along riverbanks. A native of the place, Lucas Anu Utung, guided us to such burial sites. The first site was 5 kilometers from the main site, within the abandoned Itogon-Suyuk mine complex. They consisted of 3 man-made caves which were constructed near rock shelters. At this stage of our exploratory survey, the most we could do was to observe and describe surface reality, such as making measurements and taking pictures.
Oh, ayan. Pwede na tayong gumawa ng research dito. Kaya lang, mukhang pot-hunted eh. Ano ang gagawin natin? Kukunan muna natin ang mga retrato. Yan. Bago galawin.
The themselves were beginning to provide some clues. Similar lizard or crocodile designs on ancient coffins have been discovered in some caves in Masbate, in central Philippines, and in various Malayo-Polynesian cultures, where reptiles were taken to be sacred animals.
That looks like a lizard, and that looks like a monitor lizard, that looks like a crocodile, di ba?
Reptiles are animals of both land and water. Could the design be due then to a common heritage, when the Mankayan peoples belonged to the cultural tradition of ocean or coastal dwelling people?
Para medyo... Ano? Ito this one, ito commission. The same... Oh, don't cause an earthquake. Ulit. 55 centimeters. Okay. Okay. Ilan? Saka na natin biruhin.
Coffin body,
Coffin body. Pero ito, it's almost 7 feet din. Sukatin mo nga dyan. Haka mo. Ito. Ito, sira. Itong cover height ko abot. Hops.
Then got the horn.
2.6, 2. Siguro may nawala pa rito, no? Okay, 2.70. 2 meters and 70 centimeters. Pareho. 45 ang kwan. Measurement dito.
Domina, an 84-year-old woman who claims to be related to those buried in 3 caves, told us that the coffins belonged to her great-grandparents and other relatives. This would place the cave site at an estimated 125 to 150 years old, coinciding thus to the time when Itogon-Suyuk and Mankayan were subjected to Spanish domination and the gold-copper mines began to be exploited by the colonizers. Of such burial practice, Karl Semper, the German traveler, had observed in 1861 that nearly everywhere the dead are buried without embalming in crude coffins under or beside the house shortly after death. In the valley of Benguet, there is also a cave in the rocks which contains human bones, but the elders of the village only know from tradition that their ancestors buried their dead there.
Dito, wala. Yesterday in the morning dahil sama-sama ng sunlight dito, kaya alam na natin ang gagawin natin sa susunod. Ang excavation dito dapat sa umaga para makapagtrabaho pa tayo ng maliwanag. Tara, maghanap pa tayo ba?
The cave burial was practiced throughout the Ifugao area. But what makes the cave sites of Mankayan unique was the use of the Carabao motif on the coffins, in addition to the lizard design. What did these signify to those who made them? Why is it that some coffins have the design and some do not? Was it some sort of distinction based on class, as we find in lowland cemeteries, where the opulent and elegant tombs of the rich stand in stark contrast to the humble graves of the poor? As we now went to the main site in Manaba, near the exploratory drill pad of the Goldfields Asia, we were confronted with more questions, and then more hypotheses. The site was a rock shelter, a giant boulder formerly covered with trees and grass until it was cleared by the mining firm. The boulder provided protection to 3 coffins with a carabao motif and lizard design.
Lizard of that size? Pagka nakahiga ka, tumabi sa akin, nasa Palawan ako. I was lying down on the beach. Lumapit yung makala ko nga, dragon. Kumubi ka sa akin. Pareho kami natakot.
Our bone man and physical anthropologist observed that there were slight impressions on the head, probably due to the practice of using the head to carry heavy loads.
It's like men don't carry anything. There's a cultural confirmation of what I carry, but by the shoulder. Tama.
Well, this is something right, actually.
You have to see the other one.
Even the way the fabrication is under 2 frontal elements here, and this is very sharp. And the ridges here is practically connected. It's a baby face. And the fact that the depression here is slight deformation here corresponds to a cultural trait of carrying the weight. It's a cultural confirmation of this particular life of it. Okay.
Now let's see how many individuals there are in a
Please put it back. I think it's interesting.
Come on, let's give him that at least give him his bones.
We can study the heat, but
Ito yung kabila. Yung kabila.
Made.
Okay, let's put it at sling. Let's leave it there. Just leave it there. It's a sling. Let's leave it there first. Nobody. Oh, nakita niyo yan? Plato. Yung plato? Yung plato din yan. Nakita mo? Ah, you can see that? Plastic ba yan? Plastic ba? Oh, sino mo dyan? Okay, leave it different way. Ang makuha, makipang. Ito din. Diliman. For a real body. Like I have to screen that, we're going to look at the bones, right?
What seemed intriguing in these coffins was that aside from a leg bone, only skulls could be found, about 11 of them in one coffin. Some of the skulls showed unusual configuration in the foramen magnum. Could they be due to some dreaded disease, such as leprosy? And what do the big holes at the back of the heads mean? Could they be the result of some violent blows like those inflicted from head hunting? Fray Juan de Medina reported in 1629 that the Igrotes of Mancayan were friendly when peaceful, but when hostile, they came down to hunt heads, in which they took pride. Half seriously, our physical anthropologist hypothesized the possibility that these holes were due to some gouging of the brains for food, as they still do among some tribes in Papua New Guinea.
But, stream has been possibly contributed to get acid brain inside. It is a very popular practice in Papua New Guinea to get acid brain inside.
Meron pang butas doon, no? Balot, ano?
That's also okay. It's also female, by the way. You know?
Attorney Bareng, the liaison of the Goldfields Asia in Baguio City, wrote in his letter to the company management that these were probably the results of bad deaths, a phrase which he failed to make clear. Why were they bad deaths? Nobody knew, since none in Manaba knew to whom these bone remains were related. Is it possible that the entry of alien claimants to the mines in Mancayan and Lepanto, such as the Liaos and the Mullers, not to mention the Spanish explorers Comandante Tomas de Calve and Juan de Alfaro, induced all sorts of social contradictions that often led to violence? Were some members of the community co-opted by these carpetbaggers, thereby triggering antagonisms among a traditionally cohesive tribe? Similar violent confrontations happened recently in Agusan and Surigao, in Mindanao, when people of various social origins joined the rush for gold. Indeed, sometimes we can learn from the present to interpret the past.
Malika.
In the cottage provided us by the Goldfields Asia, our group leader and ethnologist wrote his report. He emphasized that what we have accomplished is just a beginning. In the quest for truth, we need the cooperation and support of many people. For instance, the matter of bringing the coffins to Manila for exhibition or preservation was such a very sensitive matter. It was delicate enough to explain to the people out there why a group like us was tampering with the coffins and bones of their ancestors. The various dimensions of the study call for a deeper research on the subject site, covering the various fields of ethnography, ethnohistory, archaeology, and physical anthropology. For artifacts by themselves cannot tell us anything unless placed in a cultural and historical context. There are, after all, 3 levels of scientific study: observation, description, and explanation. We have made some observations and some descriptions. We have formulated some hypotheses. but we still have to draw inferences from data that we have yet to compile. Only long-term research can accomplish this. Hopefully, in due time, we could arrive at a better understanding of an aspect of that bygone era, when people buried their dead in caves, in coffins where the head of the carabao and the figure of the lizard had some meaning or value that provided a link between the living and the dead, a link that is of vital importance to the peoples of the Cordillera.
So the President will be receptive to your request. Research as much as we can, especially in areas such as this, which some people might find esoteric, archaic. As you said earlier, Zeus, it's so hard to make that so interesting or interesting.
The valley of Mankayan beckons a serious social scientist. No one knows what other secrets lie there, not only in terms of gold and copper, but more importantly, in terms of the culture of our upland brothers, a culture about to be buried and forgotten in time.